So I'm going to have to erase this and do another time lapse. But what we've got here is basic human population vocabulary. So off the top, let's talk about a few things. Crude birth rate. That's number of births per 1,000 people per year. So you're going to have a crude birth rate for a given year. You have to define the year. That's important. There isn't just like a static birth rate thing. That's the number of people being born per 1,000 in a particular year. Same thing with crude death rate. That's the number of people dying for every 1,000 citizens per year. So you have to define the year. You got to know how many citizens you've got. Doubling time. Doubling time is you take 70. Some people say 72 works better, but 70 is called the rule of 70. Is you take the growth rate in percent. So now, not the birth rate, not the death rate, the growth rate. That is important, okay? And we'll talk about how you get growth rate in a minute. TFR, you're going to hear me say that a lot when we start talking about demographic transition and sort of the hallmarks of developing nations or post-industrial nations or whatever. TFR is a total fertility rate. Is what that means. Basically, it's the number of kids a woman will have on average. Of course, you get like, 8.23 or whatever. That doesn't mean that there's 0.23 of a kid. That's not what's being said. On average of all the breeding age women in that country, how many kids are there? You divide that out, you get the number of kids on average per woman. Some of it's going to be 12, some of it's going to be 1, and you got to average that out, right? And you're going to get the TFR for the entire nation in a particular year. So, replacement level fertility. That's a TFR of approximately 2.1. And now that's the approximately symbol. Now it'll be different if the death rate's real high, but in general, it's 2.1. You got a mom and a dad. It takes 2 kids to replace themselves. That's approximately what that means. Now, some folks die before they have kids. That's where the 0.1 comes from. Sorry, folks. I got distracted with work. I had to be on camera. But anyway, on the chat. Anyway, let's keep going. So, population growth rate. This is the easy way to remember this is ins minus outs divided by the people. So let's talk about what the ins are. That's going to be, so what goes, like how do you add people in? Birth and immigration. That's in brackets. And then you have to subtract from that the outs. So that's going to be death and emigration, which is people leaving. In America, they're called expatriates, which I actually hate that term. People come and go. That's just the way the world is. Always been that way. Divided by total population. And that's going to give you a percent, because if you take a small number and divide it by a big number, you're going to get a percent like that. So, of course, you're going to have to move the decimal, but you can do that because math. Okay, so that's how we get a birth rate. Now there's a few recap. Let's go over this. That's people coming in. These are the ends. This is how you add to the population. Birth, immigration. This is how people go out. These are the outs. Death rate, that's pretty obvious. Immigration, that's people leaving. Okay, and there's your total population, and that's how you figure it out. There's only one thing left I really haven't talked about, and that's infant mortality rate. And what that means is infant death. The term mortality, not morality, mortality means death. Okay, so infant mortality rate is like per 1,000 infants, how many are dying? What's the death rate among infants? And as you might expect in developing nations where food security, and you can look that term up, food security is not good, and healthcare is not good, infrastructure like roads, highways, hospitals, electricity, public sanitation, clean water, that sort of thing is not good, then the infant mortality rate is very, very high. You can look at birth rate, you can look at per capita income. There's a lot of things you can look at to predict whether a nation is in developing stage, transition, industrial, or post-industrial. But one of the things you always want to look at is that infant mortality rate. High infant mortality rates are very common in developing nations, industrial and post-industrial nations. Then infant mortality rate is extremely low.